And we are live. And apologies for being about 5 minutes late, but then suddenly everything went blank and told me that I couldn't go live. So I had to log off and log back in again and create a new broadcast. So a very happy new year to everybody around the world who are listening to us. I'm Nadine Parry, Executive and Leadership Coach and Workplace Mediator.
Hi, Happy New Year. My name's Jenny Ling. I'm a facilitator and generally do lots of things to help support and develop professionals.
Hi, Happy New Year to you all. I'm Jan Daines, and I want to say that I never quite know how to pigeonhole myself in this section here because I don't really know. I suppose I don't like being assigned to any one particular category. So I'm a son, a father, a husband, and a grandfather. I know, despite obvious appearances. So there you are.
Happy New Year to everybody. My name's Nick Sheriff. I'm, as always, school inspector and do stuff in education.
Good man.
And you're in Dubai. And you're in Dubai.
I'm in Dubai, but maybe modern, not postmodern.
And we're all in the UK.
We're in the UK. Yeah.
Okay. So today I had put up a topic which was how to make sure that you stick to your New Year's resolution in 2021. And when I was writing this, I thought I'm probably going to be challenged by the fact that I've said, sticking to a resolution in a world where everything is changing at the moment. And nobody challenged me on LinkedIn about sticking to a New Year's resolution. So we're going to be exploring that, the four of us, and see what we come up with. And one of the things that I want to do at the end of this broadcast is to share my screen, because normally we do the kind of takeaway message. I post it on a Sunday, but I've actually never shared screen on this LinkedIn Live. So I'd quite like to take the risk today and do it, and then see what's going to happen. So that will be my goal for this broadcast today. So coming back to our topic, sticking to New Year's resolutions, goals. Who wants to start with that?
I'll start. Yeah. Well, I never make New Year's resolutions, and I'm thinking back to why I never make them, and I suppose because very often we see making a resolution as an end in itself, and that's probably why the statistics talk about how many people who make resolutions never actually fulfill them. So if I want to change something, or I want to, keep fit or lose weight are the obvious ones for me anyway, but promising myself that I will do it at New Year is not going to work for me. It's got to be something that's much more integrated and that happens when I see the need for it to happen, rather than happening rather randomly on the 31st of December, where I have to stay up till midnight, but at 1 minute past midnight, I'm off. So I think that if you set a New Year's resolution for its own sake, it's not going to work. And I think that, making a resolution without a plan is a waste of time. And I think that that's where a lot of people fall down, is they don't realize, in their professional life, they might action plan, they might do evaluations, review, and all these things. But in your personal life, very often we just set a resolution and leave it at that. So for me, it doesn't work. That's not to say I don't do change things, because I do them, but I don't do them on December the 31st or January the 1st.
I think I agree. I think if you're signing up for the event, then you've got to be very unsuccessful. I think you have to sign up for the process. And that's very difficult in a world of instant gratification. I put in some effort here and I want something back. Now, that is possible, but I think without jumping to the next bit, that requires your planning to be very nuanced to allow for that. I'm going to lose weight is not really a New Year's resolution. There are so many variables to that statement that you're bound to fail in some regard anyway. And I think the stats are 80% of New Year's resolutions are broken by February the 14th or thereabouts. So they don't have a particularly good track record.
John?
Well, I'll take your question at face value, Nadine. how do you make sure that you stick to your resolutions? So the first thing I think is to pick the right ones, as in, or pick the right one. So let's assume we're going to make a New Year's resolution and we're being kind to ourselves. I'll come back to being kind in a minute. There's no point in finding a New Year's resolution that you actually have no chance at all of achieving. Equally, there's no point in it being such low threshold that it's no effort is required, although you definitely stick to it then. But I think there's some careful thought regarding choice, and I think and so linked to that. And the other thing is, in terms of sticking to them, I think as a race, human race, we're bad at allowing those small negatives, the small failures, from overshadowing completely any of the positives that we have. Now, I'll give you an example. When I was a young lad, up until my early 20s, really, I stammered, and I could go through the day, and if I had one of the ways that people stammer is that they block, or you're just unable to get anything out at all. And if that had happened to me once in the day, then I'd consider that to be a complete and utter failure, despite the fact that the other 23 hours and 57 minutes, I was fine. It's interesting, isn't it? And yet that one event had such an emotional baggage attached to it. I'd had a bad day. Well, I hadn't had a bad day at all. I had a really good day. So I think there's a lot of perspective and being kind to yourself in this. If you are going to set some resolutions, then it doesn't help your stickability, your sticking to them, if you beat yourself up every time and allow those things to assume bigger proportions than they really do.
I like when you say be kind to yourself, because actually that could be the first content of one of our bubble, you know, of the takeaway message. Yeah. I guess I see things a little bit differently, because for me there is a date which is important for me. It's the 1st of August every year, because it's the beginning of my financial year, because I have my own business company. So for me, when I set up goals, they start for the business. They start on the 1st of August. I play the game, actually. I'm quite happy to set up goals on the 1st of January. I think that's fine. It's a new year, you know, why not? But I think we should be free to set up goals whenever we want. I think, as Jenny was saying, you know, there is no set dates, and setting goals quite personal. And ultimately, it's about sticking to them for what you really, really want. Because I mean, as I was looking at the question about, you know, sticking to your goals, and, you know, why do you have to achieve them? Because actually sometimes it's probably best not to, because you set the wrong goals, which is another issue. I think setting goals is something very personal, and only you know what the best goals are. And if you set the best goals for you, then, you know, yeah, let's stick to them and let's achieve them. But if they're not the right goals, and sometimes you don't know, you know, you set them and they're not the right one, then it's fine to tweak, to abandon, to postpone, to delay, because ultimately you're just accountable to yourself when you set them for yourself. It depends which kind of goals. So I'm kind of very flexible. I like the challenge of not doing things. I like the challenge of doing things differently as well. And I like the conformity of, it's the 1st of January. So what could I do differently? And this year, for example, I decided to completely relook at the way I was organizing my email inbox and everything related to my computer. You know, decided to think about the backup of my computer, because actually nothing is sure with IT. And because we've spent so much time using IT in 2020, I mean, certainly I've been tested on that. then I've decided to immediately relook at how I was using it and the backup behind everything. So for me, it's been a goal that I've already achieved because I've got the complete right backup, I think, from iCloud to external hard drive. And I know this is completely materialistic and, a very, very small goal to achieve, but for me, it was quite important.
Why did you schedule that for the first 7 days of January, Nadine?
That's a good question. Because I guess, I love change, right? So if I don't change, I feel something's wrong. So that's the first thing. And then because it's a new year, it's probably very silly, but because it's a new year, I quite like to immediately start with a very different habit. And I don't have many goals. On the 1st of January, I had just a couple, and one of them was related to IT as well. So not a big thing really. But I guess it's because it's the new year, and I'm thinking, let's just challenge 2021 to start with. And also because I want to leave the year behind me. So I want to make a mark straight away in 2021. So, that's kind of how I'm reasoning myself. It's not a must. I was very excited about my backup and exploring. It's, I've learned things I didn't know before. So it's good to be challenged in different ways when you've got goals that you've not had in the past. Because I've never set myself a goal to back up, everything in different ways.
So I think
Sorry, go on, Nick.
One of the worries for me is there's almost like a social stigma. It's January. I need to set some goals and New Year's resolutions. The trouble is you're putting yourself in a group where 80% of people doing that are going to fail. So the environment of that is predominantly one of failure. And that's what the statistics say. So I like to think you should be constantly setting goals. Life is not stagnant. It's constantly moving. And if you don't move, it moves past you. Surely you've got to at least keep up with it, and there are things you can do differently. It doesn't have to be better, but it might be something different. I think most people have gone through lockdown and are seeing a different way of doing things, and things in the broad sense. I suppose it's whether you really want to incorporate that in your life. And I was thinking about because there's this notion of changing behaviors, which I think is about, I would like to get hold of something different. And then there's the idea of, I already do something, I would like to do that better. And I think whilst it's a goal, that they are different things. One is about taking on the new and it's exciting, and the other is really thinking, I maybe could be at a better level for the things I'm doing. And I think that's slightly more difficult to do, because you've already got a track record of doing it at a level. And I think that you think, I should be able to easily do it better, when actually maybe that's not the case.
I feel offended, Nick, because you said 80 people are failing, and then we come straight away into
I would say statistically 80% of people fail.
Okay, but that doesn't make you a statistic, though, does it?
It doesn't.
I think that saying that 80% of resolutions fail isn't necessarily the agenda you're going to buy into. But
you can be the 20%.
Yes.
But just remember that 80% of people around you are failing.
Yes.
But it's about your goals. It's me. It's about the I am, not the group.
But isn't that exactly what the purpose of the conversation is? So that 80% becomes smaller, because what people are doing is taking on resolutions that are not
goals. With the science of what you should be doing with a goal,
or not achievable, and then for the reasons that we kind of touched on a little bit, are setting themselves up to fail. So, bing, 80%.
What I would say is that I don't think people are failing. See, if we were to set goals for people, that 80%, we would say you're not failing. Your goal is just too ambitious, too soon, you were never getting there. No one's getting there with that setup.
Well, we'd go.
Yeah,
we'd go about it in a different way, wouldn't we? We'd approach it in a completely different way. I was just going to drop in. I don't know if you know why it's January. I mean, the start of a year, but it comes from, and it sounds like I've looked this up, but I haven't. This is something that I've read about a long time ago. The word January is to do with the Roman god. I need to be careful how I say this because Janus or Janus. Anyway, it's that Roman god, and that god had two faces on his head. And he would stand at the door of the new year looking both ways. And that's the key thing, isn't it? And that's the key thing with setting an improvement goal, in that you're looking back to how you performed in the past, and then looking at the same time looking forward to see how that would shape up moving forward. So that's what links it with January. Is that Roman god thing and the two-headed thing. I just thought that was quite an interesting and neat way of working in the need to reflect before you then cast forward.
But it's interesting the language that you're using, because you've just said an improvement goal, and I'm thinking a stretch goal. Because when I did my coaching training, we talked about shall I give you a stretch? A stretch goal to improve on a little thing.
Is that the same thing then?
It is well in a way it is the same thing, because we're asking you to do some things differently. Improving is not, for me, it's not necessarily the same thing as stretching.
I see.
Okay, when you are improving, it makes it sound as if you are in a deficient mode. Whereas when you are stretching, it could be that, you're going towards that gift, that, that gold medal.
I like that.
You're stretching beyond what you think might be possible as well, aren't you?
Yes.
Stretch.
Well,
yes.
Can I just go back to the point you made, Nadine? I've been trying to get in ever since, which is unusual for me. No, it was about flexibility, and we were talking about making resolutions. And obviously, if we look back over 2020, there must have been more plans in the bonfire than in any other year. And I think that, and we've talked a lot about resilience, and we've talked about what makes people able to get through these crises. And I think that what I would say in relation to what you were saying, Nadine, is that you're balancing a very strong achievement drive with an agileness and an adaptability to enable your plans to fit in with whatever's happening at the time. And I think that people who make plans, not necessarily on January the 1st, but who stick to them because this is what we've said we're going to do, that's the people who are going to become unstuck when the world has tipped on its axis. So I think that the combination between drive, agility, and flexibility is really important when you're setting these goals. And also to make the goals, I mean, I'm a great believer in SMART goals, but there also needs to be enough of a generalization, which sounds like it's the opposite, but it's not really. So that if I make a specific goal, it can work in a number of different climates. So it can weather the storm. So what if I set a goal, say to lose we've talked about weight as being, an obvious one. If I set a goal to lose a stone, then whatever way the world is tipping, my plans have got to fall in with that. So if it's raining, I'll do a gym video. If it's a nice day, I'll go out and walk. If I'm feeling really bad, I will eat chocolate, but I'll make sure that it's balanced with everything else. So it's about having that end goal, but having the steps that you're taking towards it flexible enough to accommodate whatever's going on.
Very, very good.
But I think you're right, but that's what SMART is. So, and the point is, it's not an event. You can't set a goal on a Monday and that is your goal come hell or high water, because at some point the environment will change and the realism is gone.
Yeah.
So
but
if you
people
see it as
do that, Nick, though, don't they? And I think
because they see it
when
as
they
an
get
event.
unstuck.
Yeah, but I think they see it as an event. What they've got to sign up for is the process. So even I don't like the idea of saying, let's lose a stone or a pound. I think that's the wrong start. Prove to me you can lose a gram. Great, excellent. Right, now we've got something. We haven't even proved you can lose any weight. To put a number on it seems to be really foolhardy for me. I see goals and targets closely interrelated, but all my targets, I always say to people, they're your landmarks on the route to somewhere, and you're just ticking them off as you go.
Yeah.
No one says there's linear equidistance between every landmark, and that every landmark's got the same, value. I think you have to be realistic, because as we said earlier, it's very easy to beat yourself up about expectations. I mean, the science says you're allowed to fail some of the landmarks. Nothing changes with hitting the end goal with a couple of mistakes. You know what I mean? So
the key to what you're saying there, Nick, for me, is that you said for me this doesn't work, but actually
it's the science says that's how it works.
Hang on a minute. What you're saying is that setting a goal in this way, like setting a stone as a target, doesn't work for me. I have to do it in little bits. Okay, that's fine, but that doesn't work for me. The other way works for me. And I think this is it's psychology, isn't it? Is that we're all different and we all respond in different ways, and you and I are very, very different, left brain, right brain. Okay, so what's going to work for you is going to be very different from what works for me, and presumably.
But I think the principle of you plucking a number out of the thin air is relative to your ability and what you think is achievable. I think all we're saying is
I'm not disagreeing with that, but for me,
so we're in agreement. It's about sticking to the smart and making sure that just because the time has moved on and things have changed, we still have to make sure the goal is relative to the smart.
What would a process weight loss target goal look like?
I can tell you exactly.
Go on.
I think ultimately you have to allow somebody to prove to themselves that they have the ability of losing weight, any weight. Then the number's arbitrary.
So it's it's how you go about it.
Yes. One of the things they say is, if I was to say I'm going to lose a stone, let's say, that's the lowest version. The next better version is for you to write down an affirmation statement to yourself. And then the one after that might be to get other things involved in it. Set yourself the time, a particular gym, go with a friend. Can you see there are ways in which you build up to that? For me, the number is arbitrary.
Okay, can I make a different suggestion? Is that you actually plan it backwards. I mean, I'm a great believer in this sort of planning. So, okay, my target is going to be to lose a stone. So if I'm going to lose a stone in 9 months, then, I will plan it backwards, put the stone down the end of the 9 months and look back at each 2 weeks, each week, whatever, and measure or weigh or whatever it is against that. So that if I'm going to lose it in 9 months, then I know that each month I have to lose 2 pounds or whatever. We're all very non-metric here. But I think that by planning it backwards, in some ways it hits your.
It's becoming a process.
For the small, yeah, absolutely, it is totally a process. And then if you go below a certain weight, you give yourself a little treat, because that's how we work. But for me, just setting a goal with, I'm going to prove first I can lose weight. Well, that's a given. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. But if you do it backwards, then it's measured against your progress is measured against your final goal. And that, for me, that works for me.
Yeah. John, do you want to take the comment from Vicky?
Well, we've had a comment from Vicky Lim, which is brilliant. Thank you, Vicky. We were wondering if you heard the start of this. Nadine was wondering about whether everybody was just agreeing with the thing. So it's brilliant that you've. Vicky's saying the question is why are we setting goals? Why does each of us set a goal? Yeah.
I suppose because if you don't, life sets them for you. It's very easy to lose control, isn't it?
Yeah.
to keep yourself in charge of your life, sometimes you might have to set some goals so you get what you want or move in a direction you feel more comfortable with.
I agree. I agree that it is to keep control of what we can't control at time, but you know, with the middle circle, it's to keep control. I think sometimes it's to keep ourselves happy. I think it's to keep ourselves motivated. I mean, for example, I've just downloaded Google Fit, and every day I walk 5.2 kilometers, and that keeps me happy. It keeps me fit. So there are different reasons why we can set a goal, and I think it's very personal.
Yeah.
So you know, yeah, it can be to keep control, to be happy, to keep motivated, to keep fit. You know. Yeah.
Do you not think that the whole being in control thing is a dangerous, slippery slope, because we're not in control?
Well,
I know what you're saying, and because I share it, of course. But if we think that we are in control, well, anything that we've learned in this last 12 months shows us that we're absolutely not. There's something far bigger that is something that, you know, that is capable of interfering and pushing us. And if we have put such, I'm not saying that you're doing this at all, so don't get this wrong. But if one is putting so much store on being in control, then that really is setting yourself up for a very difficult, because we're not. Ultimately, we're not.
Oh,
but
yes,
I think
there's so much we are in control of, isn't there?
Yes.
And I mean, Nadine was talking as an example about going out for a walk. Well, she is completely in control of that. Even if it's chucking with rain, she still has the ability to make that decision.
Yes,
and
she
I
does.
think that what has proved to be so important in the past year is because these big things out there are taking away a lot of what we had control over. Like, we can't control who we see, we can't go to the pub, we can't do this, we can't do that. But actually, if we start focusing on the things that we can do and setting our goals around those things, you know, losing weight, keeping fit, learning to sing, learning a musical instrument, all these things are within your control. And those are what's important, I think, personally, to send.
Yes. So that's all about selection of the thing that you are aiming for,
and recognizing it, and actually celebrating that.
Yes.
You know, don't get hung up on what you can't do. Celebrate and create around what you can do.
Just to say, I ought to just say, because I think I may have misrepresented what Vicky said, and she's been gracious enough to offer a supportive correction. So thank you, Vicky. So Vicky saying, sorry, that she meant on a personal level, are we connecting with the why of our goal? So the original question is her question is essentially, why are you setting a goal? What's the why of the goal that you're setting? That's
a really good coaching question.
What's driving you to set that goal? And I go back to, I think it's very personal. I think it's down to our DNA. Only we know about the personal goal, and this is why I think that it's okay to be ambitious with goals, and it's okay to set courageous goals that are big, providing that you have the mindset that if you don't quite get there, if you get to 80%, then it's a huge achievement.
I was just going to say the same. I'm just so sorry to butt in.
I read you.
Yes, I can tell. Well, no, because it's just very. If you accept that it's okay to be one of those 80% that's failed.
I don't like the word failing.
No.
I don't like that. You can't put Nadine in that 80%, Jan. Honestly, even on a bad day, she wouldn't go there.
But that's the language we've used towards the start of the thing, wasn't it? The 80-20. I mean, what was the statistic, Nick? That 80% don't Of
given up their New Year's resolutions by the 14th of February.
So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with setting something ambitious if you're then kind to yourself in the fact that you haven't quite reached that. But actually, do you know what? I still managed to do this.
Yeah.
I didn't go out every day to walk by 5.2 kilometers, but I did get out on 300 of the 365. Well done.
Yeah, it's celebrating those successes in the milestones that you make, and that's why I think this backwards plan is good, because the backwards plan have the milestones, and when you've got there, that's your mini goals, isn't it, all the way along, which are smart, which I think are really...
on your point. I think one of your questions is philosophical, which is is your life self-deterministic or not? And I think I'd hate to say that it isn't, although maybe it isn't. And I think from listening to you, I think the danger is it sounds like event again. And I think choosing to do something once is not the goal. The goal surely is about a repetition, being able to go through a number of landmarks to achieve something that you individually feel valuable and you want. And I think Jan's point might have been, do you know what? It isn't linear, and I can't divide it up into 6 neat steps all the time because anything can happen. I mean, the golf in my previous life, we used to say, control the controllables. After I've hit the ball, what happens afterwards is nothing to do with me.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I think it's back to your point about being kind. I think that's the realistic bit, not overreach yourself. I mean, you should all have a go at doing it, but if it doesn't work and you miss the landmark, are you resetting the goal, or do you want to work about catching back up? Because I don't think failure can constantly not hitting your landmarks, which is what I think happens in the New Year's resolutions. I almost feel, it's only anecdotal, but people are on such pressure to make a goal that actually they wouldn't make goals like that in the rest of the year. They might be a little bit more sophisticated and sensible. And maybe because everyone eats too much crisps and chocolate over the Christmas, all the goals are about losing weight. And, that's not maybe that just muddies the waters.
Soft target then.
Yes.
But I think it's interesting to go back to the 80%, Nick, because I'm interested in understanding why there are 80% of people who are abandoning their goals where it doesn't work for them anymore. Is it because they're not resilient? Is it because external circumstances are changing? Is it because they had not anticipated barriers, and they have a new fear? And sometimes we are saying, well, actually, 80% are not managing that. It sounds negative, but actually behind that, they're still growing, maybe through pain, but they're still
black and white, isn't it? If you see that 80% is failure, that's black and white. What it doesn't measure is progress that people have made along there. I mean, another statistic that I've got is that 33%, those who commit to planning what's happening, are 33% more likely to achieve their goals. So, where does that come in with the 80%? And we can't legislate, or we can't possibly know unless we do some kind of in-depth research as to the reasons why people are failing.
I think it links to this question about why.
How strongly motivated you are.
Exactly, because I mean, the notion of habitual change becoming permanent is in the science literature. Started in the 50s. Some surgeon guy called Maltz was seeing that people who had a limb amputated would still feel the phantom limb up to about 21 days afterwards. And he wondered why it kept coming to this roundabout figure. And he then did some more research. He wrote a seminal paper in the 60s that said a minimum of 21 days before we could get behavioral change. But of course, a minimum. Later studies say it's more like 66 days before habit becomes automatic. And I think people have to be genuinely realistic. They might start to get some reasonable habits and some changes, but it's not automatic where you can leave it and that's just you now. And I think there is a sophistication about it that maybe these gurus have just made it too simplistic. It's not that easy. And I think if you set yourself up for a really big goal and expect to get there in 21 days, there's a large likelihood you could be disappointed.
But it's fascinating what you say, Nick. And I think you said that in the LinkedIn post today. You mentioned the 66 days. And I said to you, oh, I want to talk about that, right? Because I want to understand what's happening in someone's brain during those 66 days. You know, because as you said, I mean, learning is not linear. It's just not like that, right? So I'd love to be in different people's brain to see what does it look like, that habit that is being created. At what point is it becoming stronger, more resistant to some extent?
I must just say, study 66 is the average.
Yeah.
Like Jenny's point about the individual nature of it all, some people had change in 18 days. In some people, it took 256, you know, as individuals. So if you like, the time bit is almost irrelevant. And I think when people say by this date, I'm going to have done this, it almost trumps, as Jenny was saying, all the progress points. If you look back at all the progress you've made, you'd be really positive and you're going in the right direction, even if you've not hit your end target. And maybe that they've not failed. They've just not hit their target when they said.
But the time, you're saying the time is irrelevant. Actually, the time is relevant because why is it that some people why is it that the average is 66? And why is it that for some people it's going to be 250, days? I mean, that's a huge difference.
Can I just, oh, sorry.
Yes, go, Jenny.
Sorry, I was just going to say that if the four of us, random four, similar backgrounds, but very different backgrounds, very different personalities, very different, more differences than there are similarities. If we all decided to set goal X, whatever goal X was, then we would all progress in different ways and in different paces towards that goal. And I would suspect that for me, probably the key going back to Vicky's point is around the why, is how determined and how driven are you to achieve that goal? Because if you could take out any one factor that would help or inhibit you towards that goal, for me, it would be about your drive. So within the four of us, knowing the four of us quite well, I would say that chances are Nadine would get there in less than the time certainly it would take me. I won't necessarily speak for Jan and Nick because and that's because I would attribute that to drive.
But it's all
disagree with me.
Well, it must be. You disagree in a minute, Nick. It must be very driven by the degree to which the why fits with each of us. Yes. Nadine is much more driven than I am, but I could find a goal that I would be much more likely to reach than Nadine because it links with my. Or have I misunderstood?
Yes, slightly. I wasn't talking about necessarily us having. I mean, the goal bit is irrelevant. It's really that whatever your personal goal is and your personal why, that the person with the strongest drive to get to that goal would go in the less than 66%. That's what I mean.
Okay, so the goal has an equally coherent with each of our individual whys, if that makes sense. Yeah. We've all selected something that means that much to us that we're all gonna. In which case, I think I agree with you that.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. How about that?
I was waiting for you to disagree with me. Actually, I was
the nature of the way that Nadine approaches things is very different from the way that I approach things, and much more likely to result in her achieving that.
That was my point.
Than me.
The only thing I would add to that is because we're talking about change, because I come from a sporty background. Often I deal with people at the start who are not the same people as they are halfway through. So their motivation and drive might require me to have a lot more input in and motivation. But actually, once we're going, they build and they get more drive. They're more motivated. They see previous successes and they build momentum. So I think rather than saying it's what's in the pot at the start, I think it's more about the individual's ability to gain this momentum through mini successes that really drives through to, maybe they exceed their goals.
Yeah.
It wasn't about what's in the pot at the start. It was about who the person is. And I mean, I can think of a brilliant example of this is I facilitate MPQSL and MPQML. And this year has been really difficult. I started a cohort off face-to-face in January. And everybody was all, great, this is great, etc., etc. Then came the lockdown and all the issues in schools. And then came a face-to-face, a virtual one in September, October. So they'd had sort of 9 months of fairly dry in terms of any kind of interaction. And not many of them turned up. But those of them who did turn up had their motivation completely switched back on because of that intervention. But what I'm saying is that if you have that drive from the beginning, so perhaps the people who came to that one had a stronger drive than others because they were able to get through that dry period with nobody supporting or asking them questions. And I think it's not what's in the pot at the start, it's what's in your personal pot. Because
that's what it means.
I'm saying. I'm saying, look, it's not about the person at the start because that person is left behind on day 2. They're now
right.
person.
Okay. So are you agreeing then, Nick?
No, I'm saying that I don't.
I was worried from that. I thought
no, I'm not disagreeing. I just think it's more nuanced. I think it's too. I think the problem is with goal setting and that people think it's too simplistic, and I think their expectations are way off. As I said, I like to see people knocking down targets, proving them themselves that they're capable. We can move the landmarks further apart, and it should do. It's almost like a stretching elastic band. The more you stretch it, the harder it is to pull it. And people will be like that. I don't think it's linear. Every month it's the same amount. I think it should move as the person moves.
Yeah, I think I agree with Jenny that it's related to your own drive. I agree that it's related to your courage as well. Like you don't fear kind of failing, if you're not getting into your goal by that deadline, you're okay with it and you accept that it's going to take a little bit longer. And I think there is a lot to say about resilience as well.
I do.
Because when you set goals, no matter what goals they are, there is always the unexpected. And sometimes the unexpected can really, really test you big time, actually, particularly if you already carry a lot of luggage. There's that mental health, what people don't see, because there is how we are and how we are internally, in our head. And I think all of that is really important to be able to achieve our goal at some point. So the drive, the courage, the resilience. Jenny, we're doing a lot of work on resilience at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that plays a huge role with those goals and the ability to be agile. I mean, we were talking about it this week, Jenny, and to respond to things you'd not planned. And the other thing I want to make as well as a point, because Nick, you mentioned that earlier on, and I actually agree with you. It's when you said, how many times, I think you said that. Sometimes you have to, when do you achieve a goal? Is it when you've achieved it once? Or is it that you have to achieve it several times? It's a bit like a science experiment, isn't it? that you can say, yeah, I mean, now definitely I've achieved that goal.
Usability.
Yes, yes.
It depends on the nature of the goal, doesn't
Depends
it?
what it is. Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
But it's
Nadine, can I
also-
just
yes,
pick up Vicky's point, because I think
Yeah.
she's following on from what you were saying and saying,
Right.
looking ahead and having the foresight to identify things that might derail you, creating the awareness early in setting a goal in order to pull yourself back on track. And the first time I came across this sort of thing was risk registers, which, you know, all the time that I was a head teacher, I never had a risk register or was even aware of one. And then the risk register, well, if this happens, and having contingency plans and, you know, RAG rating it and how likely is this to happen. And I think that I totally agree, Vicky, that it's really important to look at that. But I also think it's about not getting too hung up on the millions of things that could happen, but having that agility within your goal setting or your process that you are going through to enable you to sidestep or to get over or to overcome those obstacles that arise.
I would urge the SMART target that, you know, in itself has to be flexible, has to be reflective, has to constantly be changed with the environment that changes around you. That I think I agree, it's all about the individual, because it's only the individual that can make that assessment. I mean, there's the Goggins 40% rule, you know, that says when you think you're done, reality tells us you're actually at 40%. There's another 60 in there. And that's what all the high performers and the Navy SEALs and people like that say. So if you like, I think people have to be resilient, yes, but I think the target has to be resilient.
Yeah.
I think it has to withstand the,
as Vicky said, yeah.
and I think if your target's moving and a bit fuzzy sometimes, I think that's good. I'd be more worried these rigid targets that stand on their own. They're no relationship to how you're feeling, you know, the day you're having or the environment around you.
But I think also I quite like very, very specific targets that have a depth as well. I personally quite like that, because it's driving me even more, because
So give an example.
Very specific. I mean, for example, the work that, I mean, it's a silly example, but I did some work. I go back to my technology and my Mac, and, you know, I had to make sure that everything was working fine and that I had some backup, and actually there were a number of very specific technical things. Because I had one Toshiba external hard drive, I had assumed that my second Toshiba external hard drive would behave in the same way. So my goal was the same, to have two external hard drives on which there are all my files. Okay, well, wrong assumption, because the second external hard drive didn't want to behave in the same way as the first one.
Okay.
So I had to then do a tutorial last night,
yes.
you know, to understand why my external hard drive was behaving differently. Now that's very technical. I'm not technical at all. And then I understood. Then I got it right. So it's not a big deal, but it's just that sometimes if it's very specific, you can achieve it quicker, perhaps. It's just an
Google.
What I like about that is that you've described a whole series of sort of associate bits of learning that have attached themselves to where you thought you were going. So you wanted to. So your aim was to get your backup sorted, and and in order to get there, you had to learn about the way that your backup devices talk to your laptop or wherever it is, and work it through. So you wormed into that, and yeah, that's really interesting. That takes me back to one of the things you said earlier, linked with, I wrote it down, where you talked about stretch goals.
Yes.
Rather than, and the thing I liked about that is, so with my background working with youngsters and young adults with special need, is that quite often that they a success for them is to broaden what they do rather than to you know, particularly in education, we think success is only measured when you've gone further and understood more and achieved that and gone that. Actually for some people, applying the same thing to a new context or broadening what you do, which is kind of what was happening there I've corrupted it slightly, is equally important. In fact, it's particularly important for that population.
And it's tiny steps as well, isn't it? And it's about measuring and celebrating those tiny steps as well.
It is. A lot of people don't even recognize that that's progress. They think that progress is going only there.
Getting to the end.
And actual fact, forgive me, pointing to somewhere that's way off the screen. But you can have progress sideways.
Yeah. This week I was working with a leader. I did a video about that because we talk about what a high achiever is. And that leader said to me, well, I want to perform even better. That's the goal. And then we talked about, well, what does it mean to perform even better? You know, at what point are you a high achiever?
Yeah.
You know, on a ruler of 10 centimeters, where do you hit it? And it was quite interesting, actually, because I very much wanted to push that person to be very specific. Like, what does it look like? When are you a high achiever and when are you not? When do you just miss it? When are you borderline, right? When is it tipping? How do you need to be? What a great discussion we had about talking about what it looked like in terms of behavior as well.
Yeah.
I just add the bit, I was trying to work out how do I explain what I mean. And there's this notion of getting to a new position. Can I prove to myself that I can get to a new position? And then there's this notion of sustaining the new position. And I'll give you an example. So over a period, could I prove to myself that I could run 100 meters in 10 seconds? And on my goal, can I hit it? Yes, I could. Can I do it the next day, the day after, the week after? And I think that's the thing about habitual goal setting is you've got to be able to hit it, but hitting it once is not it. You've got to sustain it, move to the new position, you know, own that new position. And I think that requires a little bit more nuance.
Unless your goal is to climb Everest, and once you've done it, you've done it.
Ah, that's an interesting one.
Or, you know, I've got one of my goals is to swim the length of the River Wye. Once I've done it, I'll have done it. If I ever
I think that's a pretty good one. I think there are those almost self-actualizing goals in life, things you just do for the sake of doing them, and they're great goals. I wonder how they work in a company, in a business context, where, you know, if you did it once, I did that, but can you do it next year? Oh yeah, I did it last year.
It's a different sort of goal, isn't it? Because you know, all the good things that have happened to me in order to be able to swim that 150 miles.
Yes.
Once if that literally is it, and then I let it drop, those all fade away then. Whereas do you see what I mean? Whereas if my goal was to become my swimming stroke sufficiently efficient that I could swim 150 miles, then that's a subtle change. In a goal. It's enabled me to go for this thing I'm trying to do.
It's back to that thing you were saying about
it's a better
progress. One's kinder to you, isn't it? The building the skills is much kinder.
Yeah.
Different.
Yeah, fascinating, hey?
That's amazing. You're making me think now, Jan. You know, I've always wanted to climb the Kilimanjaro. I actually flew over it once.
Did you?
When I went to Zanzibar. And my dream is to climb it. And so that's a goal, right? And now I'm thinking, so would I want to repeat that goal several times? Would I want to climb it several times? And I guess I'd say the same thing as you. No, I mean, you know, I'll climb it once and that will suffice. If I can do it once, I'll be very happy. So it's quite interesting as to why some goals we're quite happy to do them just once, but others we're quite happy to repeat them.
Yeah, well, I would reckon that it would change as well. Because I reckon you would be if you set yourself a goal of climbing Kilimanjaro, I would like to suggest that you would be a changed person at the end of it, and that wouldn't then be the only mountain that you ever climb from then on. I should think your habits and your way of life will have changed so that you are popping out to climb the Brecon Beacons with me we're going to the Lake District, or you and Phil climb, whatever, because it's become part of your
psyche.
Way of, it's become part of your raison d'etre, maybe.
Or you could get so ill with altitude sickness you resolve never to go up a mountain again.
Yes.
Well, or whatever it is. Yes. Are you there, Nick? Or have you?
Nick seems to have frozen. He doesn't seem to be with us. Shall I share screen with my bubbles to see?
Yeah, because you want to.
So screen sharing is easier with 2 monitors. Works best on the. So I'm not going to. Okay. Has it shared? Did it share?
Not yet.
Yeah, it hasn't. No.
Coming. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Very busy screen.
I don't even know what you're saying. You should be seeing this. Do you see the bubble?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's full screen now. Yeah. Can you make it slightly bigger?
Can you make it a lot bigger? Somewhere between that and the one before.
One more. Oh, back.
That's perfect.
Do you see it?
Yeah, just about.
Well, look closely.
Yeah, I need new specs.
Be kind to yourself.
I'll have to practice that. So that's one of my new goals.
No, that wasn't anything.
It seems to be it's quite jerky, isn't it? Between this and the next one, there's a big gap. It needs to be maybe slightly bigger than this. Not as big as the other.
Nadine, I don't think
Well, I need new specs. I know that.
Okay.
Yeah, better.
Okay.
Yeah, hold on.
Better.
Yeah.
Right. So I've taken some notes about what we said in our conversation. So we talked about being kind to ourselves. We talked about having stretch and improvement goals, the sustainability of the goal, the knowing our why, the being flexible and being agile, the looking at the progress and the process.
It's celebrating that as well, isn't it?
Celebrating that. I'll make a note of that, Jenny. Thank you. We talked about being driven and resilient, and we also said actually courageous, and doing our risk register. I think that's really important. So now, if I want to, I'm really practicing here. I'm learning how to not share my. So now I have to stop sharing my screen. So stop sharing screen, and we are back.
Well done.
Can we make a suggestion?
Yes. Go.
Not to do with your screen sharing technique, but to do with your 10 thingies.
Yes.
Is that right? Well,
yes.
So sorry, I've apologized for the first one. Put the Y in inverted commas.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I wondered whether you could combine the two, because there was something we've talked around to do with being realistic as opposed to being aspirational.
Okay.
And I think it might be worth. I'm happy for you to completely say no, but I think that's worth considering, because people often talk about let's be realistic, and I think that's dangerous a little bit. I mean, I get it, but I think it's dangerous if realistic is too down here.
Getting the balance, isn't it?
And actually, we could, because there's that whole challenge thing, isn't there?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that from our education schools background dealing with people learning. And so I think there's a realism aspirational continuum that needs to be considered.
No, I like that actually, Nick. Jan, I like that very much.
Fine. You can attribute to Nick. He'll
reply to anything.
Nick is back, so that's okay. Okay, well, we've been on air since we've been live actually for nearly 1 hour.
Nearly an hour.
Which is great. So thank you very much, everybody. Just to let the 706 million users on LinkedIn know that in a week time, we will be having a guest Lisa Grace Wilson. Lisa is the editorial editor of director of Teach Middle East magazine.
Yeah.
And she will come and be with us next week, and we will be talking about education. We've yet to decide exactly the stance that we will take, but very likely to be about education, online learning, exams, no exams. So we are really looking forward to that next week. So Nick, Jenny, and Jan, thank you so much for contributing to the discussion today. And
as always.
And I'll see you soon.
And Vicky, thank you for your contributions, Vicky. That's been really helpful.
Thanks, Nadine. Yeah, thanks, Vicky.
Thank you, Vicky.
Thanks.